So before we get started, I just want to quickly thank you, Jared, for agreeing to do this. Really an honor to have you here. Everybody in the audience right now is thrilled to have you here. Truly, truly an honor. Um, so before we get started, we're going to let you introduce yourself, and so you can do just plug yourself right now or anything you'd like to.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Just for the intro's sake, my name is Jared. So I've been a concept artist in the industry for 11 years, going on 11. And before doing concept art, I worked at a bookstore. And then before that, I had no job. I was unemployed. And then before that, I went to college. My BFA, or my Bachelor of the Arts degree, is in theater, actually. And then I minored in fine art and film study. So my background was not really in art. I mean, it was in art, but not really art. And then after graduating college, I kind of floated around and did various jobs, or I tried to do a lot of community theater and things like that. After that, I worked at a bookstore called Borders, and I worked there for about a year. And after that, I was pretty much sick of retail. I was sick of working, a grinding job that gave me no personal enjoyment. So I kept coming across these books that were called Digital Art Masters books, and there's a lot of really great art from a lot of different artists out there, and that's how I discovered concept art, and that's how I discovered 3D. And so that was my gateway into the world. And I asked my cousin, because my cousin worked in games, and I was like, hey, do you know any schools that teach this stuff? And he pointed out a few schools, and one was Gnomon. And I did my due diligence on all of these schools, and Gnomon came out on top for me, just because the board of directors were all people who were in the industry, all the teachers were industry, so it just made sense, like, this is the place I'm going to go. And that was my training into CG and concept art, and I ended up walking out of school with a job, and that job lasted for about 7 years. And so I
Nice.
was incredibly lucky.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you've kind of been everywhere.
A little bit of everything, I think, and all of those experiences kind of led me to this. So it was a little bit of luck, and kind of following the clues what I should be doing with my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. So I've got a few questions to ask you, kind of based off of your work, specifically on the Godzilla related stuff, and then we'll let everybody else ask you questions. And we're gonna have a great time here. So I guess we'll go ahead and get into this. So out of curiosity, when did you start, or when did you find out that you would be designing Mechagodzilla for Ready Player One? And then when did you find out about Godzilla vs. Kong?
So the first time, the first Mechagodzilla, I was working at a studio called Aronson Creative, and I was working there with a team of guys at the time, and we knew the book. I don't think I read it until the project came in, but I read the book just to familiarize myself with everything, and then we just kind of started on the show. And what was really fun about it is that we had total freedom in many cases to just do whatever we wanted. And there were a lot of characters that were already kind of set. Mechagodzilla being one of them, and then the rest were like background characters that are going to have like a split second on screen. And so most of the job for Ready Player One was designing those guys, and that was a blast. And then they told me, okay, Jared, you're gonna do Mechagodzilla. And the reason why I got it is I was the senior artist there at the time, and also there was so much to do, so everybody was tackling different stuff. So I alone handled Mechagodzilla, and really, I think I was on him for maybe I want to say maybe a week and a half. It was very quick on him, just because the deadlines were really fast, and in some cases we had maybe a day and a half to do a full character, like a full design, and so the timelines were very short. It was a very fast, like to me, building Mechagodzilla was a blur, just because I tried different things. They give you notes. They're like, and the notes consisted of like, okay, shrink the head by 15%, 20%, shrink the head by 35%. It's very minute stuff, and it's not really the sexy concept art stuff that everybody thinks the job is. A lot of it is just like minor tweaks like that. But I did a few versions which were, they looked too lizard-like, just like a standing reptile, so not really Mechagodzilla. And then we got the note that they wanted it to look. Let me see if I can pronounce this correctly. Noriyoshi Ohrai. I did okay. So he did a series of posters. So they came back, they being the producers, the client, Steven Spielberg. They wanted this specific Mechagodzilla, and so they pointed to one poster that Ohrai did, and it's a badass poster, and you can see Mechagodzilla at the top, and that's it. Like, you get like a top half view of him, and so that's what they wanted, and so pretty much my job just became like studying that, and they do this thing where they're like, hey, we want you to do this thing but not this thing. So they wanted it to look like the poster but also not like the poster. So there's like a hair's breadth of wiggle room in there, and that was my experience on the first Mechagodzilla. So once they hit us with that note, I did like 2 versions, and then the rest of their notes were like shrink the head, enlarge the head, things like that. And that was it. He was done. He was approved, and he went on. He went on to go in the final scenes. And his entrance is really really memorable in that movie.
Yeah, really awesome scene. That's easily the highlight of the movie for, I think, a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. That's where all the action is.
Right, exactly. And, you can't get anything better than Gundam and Iron Giant fighting Mechagodzilla. And then, how did you find out you were going to do Mechagodzilla for Godzilla vs. Kong?
Yeah, so I was working at Legacy Effects at the time. So I'd been in-house with them for not very long, actually. It was a couple of months. And, I've worked on some various, projects, commercials, things like that, designing for them. And so it's such a cool place to work, because everywhere you go, there's, sculpts happening, and it's just like, it's a big toy factory. And so I was there for, I want to say, maybe a couple months. And so I got to know everybody pretty well by then, just, coming in every day, getting to know people. And our supervisor, or actually our coordinator, Damon, he came up to me, and, Damon and I became good friends, and I like to as an artist, I'm always like, hey man, is there anything coming down the pipe? That for me, anything good for me? And he plays coy with me, and he's like, oh yeah, we may have a thing or two, and so he was kind of like teasing me about something coming in, and finally one day, him and Lindsay, my supervisor, they told me, they're like, okay, Godzilla vs Kong is coming in, and the character is going to be Mechagodzilla, and I went, oh, okay. uh, I'm like, oh man, and I said to him, like, you guys know I did RPO Mechagodzilla, and they were like, oh, cool, neat, and it was about like at that level, and and so that's how I found out, and then I think they told me on a Thursday, and then I started that next Monday, um, just building up the first concept for it.
Wow, that's the definition of being at the right place at the right time.
It really is, because the odds that I would be there, the odds that that show was happening at that time coming in, I could have been elsewhere at the time. I could have been freelancing, or who knows. So I just happened to be at Legacy at the time, and I know some artists that had worked at Legacy before then. So I knew they did MonsterVerse stuff, and a buddy of mine, Ian Joyner, worked on Godzilla 2014. So I knew they went you know back with all the way with Gareth Edwards, designing on those shows. And so I knew like it was a possibility, but I didn't think it was gonna happen anytime soon.
Hmm.
And then let alone Mechagodzilla.
That's awesome. So when you designed Ready Player One Mechagodzilla, were you able to use the experience you got from that when making the GVK one, or did you try and look at it entirely, clean slate?
Well, since doing RPO, I figured, okay, well, I can't obviously do that again. So, and also I knew that in RPO, since they wanted, the Noriyoshi poster, that was the, I mean, that was it. That's what they wanted. So it was, not really design on my standpoint. Like I kind of adapted his design, and with GVK, I knew that it couldn't look like any other one. They didn't give me like any notes saying like, hey, it's got to look, it can't look like RPO or anything. They just said, go ahead, do a version, and we'll see. Um, but yeah, drawing on that experience, I knew some other thing, some ways to kind of work the anatomy, or like building the tail, uh, like little things. So I didn't really use any parts or pieces from the same project, but once you know how to assemble, a bot like this, that experience helps out. So I definitely drew on the experience of making him, but I tried to go as far away from RPO as possible.
Yeah, and I think it really worked. Both designs look really unique in their own special ways. And I know a lot of people, especially the people listening, a lot of people here really love both designs for very drastic differences. And that's really cool, and I think everybody can agree that you did a really great job. I know personally, I love Ready Player One Mechagodzilla. It's one of my favorite designs.
Yeah, it's interesting, like how now that GVK has come out, it's made people take a second look at RPO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Give him
definitely.
but now people come in with a hard opinion, one way or the other.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna skip a few of these because you were pretty thorough there, and I feel like asking some of these questions would just be repetitive. Um, but In a past interview, you stated that you had made other creatures for Godzilla vs. Kong.
Yeah.
Is there any details you could share or show us about those creatures?
Well, most of them, I mean, they got cut. I did some Hellhawk stuff, which I just posted. That was, you know, not really designing. They're like, hey, take the model and tighten it up a little bit. Maybe try some options on the face. And so I did one for that, and there was another creature. It ended up becoming Doug, and I did a take on him based on a concept that Matt Alsop did, and I thought that was going to do pretty well. And then I did one more creature that got cut, and I don't think I can talk about like what he is, and the only reason why I'm not sure about if I can talk about it or not is if they decide to save him for another movie, something like that. If I post the work, you can get in trouble. So it's along the line of like what's been approved to talk about. So I don't know if that guy, like he definitely didn't make it in the movie, but I maybe, who knows, maybe they'll use him later on. You never know. And then some other stuff that I can't talk about that also got cut. It would have been super cool, but such is the nature of film. They ultimately opted to keep the movie at a tight timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So they made a lot. They must have made a lot of changes after I was done looking at it.
Yeah. Now, out of curiosity, could you give us some fun names of the monsters that got cut, like Doug? Do you have anything you could say, like what would you call these scrapped monsters that you're not supposed to talk about or show? Is there a little teaser?
We don't when we're working on stuff, we don't really get names. We don't know what anything, like a lot of times they'll keep concept artists in the dark about stuff for various reasons. One is they don't want to spoil it. They don't want you to know too much. So I didn't know basically any of them. There were some names that like the Hellhawk was called Yoshima originally, and I don't know if there was another name for the lizard. He had some other code name, but really, like, we don't know any of that stuff, and a lot of details are very minimal. They'll give you stuff like, hey, it's a large scary lizard that has to run around and eat something, and that's like the bulk of the description you get.
I see. Well, that looks like that's all the questions I've got. So we're going to go ahead and ask some that we've got in the chat here. So we've got Slasher, who's an awesome guy. Been here for a while. He wanted to ask you what your favorite Mechagodzilla design is.
Well, I like Kiryu. The it's Millennium, right? The Tokyo SOS.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. I love him basically because I'm a sucker for the huge shoulder guns. But every time I've worked on Mechagodzilla, they don't want the shoulder guns, so I haven't gotten to do them yet.
I gotcha. Kiryu's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely like specific things I adapted from him when doing GVK. So I looked at Kiryu a lot, and I just thought he's definitely one of the more like polished suits that they've got.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks amazing.
And then we've got Zerelius, who is an awesome artist. Got a really cool Instagram page. They wanted to ask what your best advice is to get into the concept art industry.
Yeah, it's so wildly different for everybody. For me, I got an internship that was my foot in the door, but those are rare to come by. So my advice is start putting out lots of work and start building a portfolio that you're ready to show. Big thing I basically tell everybody is make a list of the studios that you want to work for. Doesn't matter how out of reach it may seem. just make that list. So like at the top of your list is, or properties is if your dream job is Marvel, right? That's your dream. You have to look at artists who work at Marvel, and because that's where the bar is. So look at the artists who work at Marvel, right, and start producing a body of work that can get you noticed, get you some attention. That's like the top 5 goal, right? So if you like Marvel or Lucasfilm or Warner Brothers or something like that, that's your top. That's your top, right? Your top 5. Your bottom 5 are smaller studios that are not like the AAA elite studios you may want to work for. But these are studios that are smaller. They're they have fewer people. They need people, and they need people who a lot of times are just getting started, or maybe they're not quite senior level just yet. So make a list of your bottom 5 studios, which are smaller studios that maybe aren't the top shelf stuff that you want to be doing, but these are places that need people. So what you do is you start building out your portfolio and applying to those smaller studios. And ways to get seen are definitely posting your work, on different platforms, all kinds of platforms. Post it everywhere. Post constantly, basically, and then get your work seen. And doing things like going to conventions. This is before COVID. Going to conventions, meeting people, talking about art, and getting to know people, getting experienced artists to look at your portfolio, and then getting an honest critique from them, because that's also going to be your window into the world.
Awesome. That's actually kind of inspirational too. I'm not much of a artist myself, but that's really good advice that I think a lot of people could take into consideration.
I'll put it this way: is my work coming out of school was terrible, like really really bad. The only reason why I got a job was because of the internship. So that internship turned into a job. But if I hadn't gotten that internship, I would be graduating with my student reel, which was terrible. So my work was not up to snuff to get that would get me a job outside of the internship that I started at. And so I was working in the industry, but my work was terrible. Like I was really struggling, especially when I was looking at all these senior artists that I was sitting next to. I didn't really feel like I belonged, because these guys are top-notch artists. And I'm sitting here going like, what the hell? How did I slide in here, and why are they paying me? Because this is ridiculous. And so it takes a long time to get good, and there are dips in that quality up and down over the years. So the big thing is just be patient with yourself in the process, because it takes a long time to get good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the next question we have is from Hamid, who's a European Godzilla fan who is really obsessed with the MonsterVerse, especially. Maybe too much, but I'll leave that to him. He asks, what is your most proudest design you have ever worked on during your career, and which one was the most enjoyable?
Obviously, I love Mechagodzilla for GVK for many reasons. It's definitely the biggest character I've ever designed, like the biggest on-screen character, the biggest kind of push behind a character, where they're like, making toys and lots of posters and seeing concept art from other people. Mechagodzilla is definitely like the biggest character, and I'm super proud of him, just because the there are some unique design aspects on him that are, hopefully will stand the test of time. So that was a big one. The other one is Pete's Dragon, just because it was like a really sweet story to work on, which is so opposite of what I usually do, which is just like horrible death, awful monster things. So to work on like a really nice character was a great change of pace. And then I loved how the movie came out, and then also the director. I only sat with him for a few hours in one day, and I got a sense of the guy, and I'm like, man, this director, I've never heard of anything that he's done, but I got a feeling about this guy, and I've been watching his work ever since. And now he's got a movie called The Green Knight coming out, and the director is David Lowery, and I just think this dude has got a really unique vision. So it was, I don't know, for the perspective of like getting to meet a young director and watching his career, I think Pete's Dragon was a really fun show for that.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I'll have to check out the movie. I've never heard of it, but now you got me interested.
It's a kids movie, and it's for young children, and it's a very soft and gentle movie. So it's not like the stakes aren't too high. It's a very heartwarming film, but it's I was super proud of the design, and the movie came out really good.
That's awesome. So the next question we've got is from Extra, who is also a huge MonsterVerse fan. And I think you'll be able to tell by his question. Jared, how do you feel about contributing to the movie that saved all of cinema?
I don't know about saving all of cinema. It just happened to. It just kind of happened to happen at a time when people were ready to go to the movies. It feels awesome, just contributing to that movie in general. But the fact that it did well, the fact that it did well despite the pandemic, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Smile also has a few questions. I know he thinks I'm skipping them, but I'm gonna save the best for last. So, next question on my list is from Devilman, who is a moderator here. And he asked, how did it feel working on such an iconic franchise such as Godzilla?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, there is a feeling that happens when you work on a show that has any kind of clout or IP. There are different feelings associated with working on different kinds of projects. When you're on a smaller show or a smaller project, it's really exciting because the energy is fresh, and they want fresh ideas. When you're on a bigger show, there's a lot more pressure, especially with yourself if you're a fan. So being a fan of the MonsterVerse, and then jumping in on the last movie to design a character, it's a lot of pressure, and it's exciting because you're like, woo, yeah, I've always wanted to work on this. And then you're also like, holy shit, it's all coming down, And then also when I worked on GVK, I really did not think I was going to get anything through. I didn't go in being like, I'm going to nail Mechagodzilla and it's going to be so easy. And that's not the feeling. I thought, well, I already got one Mechagodzilla through in my career. There's no way I'm going to get two. So that's why I decided to really I pushed myself really hard on GVK because I wanted to prove to myself that I could still hit the mark. And so it was shocking that they liked what I did so early on, and then it was doubly shocking that they came back I think a month later to work on some other stuff. And they said, we really love the Mechagodzilla design. And I was like, oh, cool, neat. I'm glad you guys liked it. But my skeptical concept artist brain says, yeah, they say that, but it's going to change in production and it'll look totally different. And no, it was like 1-to-1 with the design, and that's a very bizarre feeling. It's a high, like you feel great. You're like, yeah, I did it, and then you're like, holy shit, it's actually happened.
That's awesome. Speaking of Mechagodzilla being 1-to-1, Blitzo, who's a really cool guy, wanted to know what material is Mechagodzilla 2001 made out
Yeah, well, I didn't think it was going to be any space metal or anything like that. I assumed when I was kind of designing, I kind of put myself in the headspace of a kaiju engineer, but I figured they were scrapping stuff from buildings. So a lot of it would be steel, because I figured that after King of the Monsters, all half the world is wiped out. So I figured Apex was going in and they were scrapping buildings and finding spare parts wherever they could. I assumed he was kind of built out of old buildings and ship liners, things like that. The the amount of metal and the amount of materials required to build something of that height would be astronomical.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a cool idea. Thinking about the Apex facilities taking buildings that are decommissioned or, building material and taking it to their secret underground bases. That's kind of a cool idea. Never thought of that before.
Yeah, the if you wrap your head around the infrastructure required to build this thing, it gets a little overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a cool idea. So the next question, it's three questions, is from E200 Paragon, who is a self-proclaimed story creator, who has some really interesting concepts. So his first question is, have you done or thought about doing designs for other Toho robots, such as Gigan or Mecha King Ghidorah?
Well, it's funny is I didn't really get like a lot of the I wasn't really thinking about a lot of those other guys when I was working on GVK, and then after the movie came out, everybody started asking me like, "Hey, do you want to do other ones?" I'm like, of course I want, of course I want to keep working on these. I definitely have ideas for all of them. I like ways that they could all look, updated into the MonsterVerse. So if I ever get that opportunity again, yeah, I'm super excited to do it.
That's awesome. So his next question was, what are your thoughts on Godzilla 1998 and Godzilla the series, which also came out around 1998?
That was the cartoon series, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't watch the cartoon series because I remember just being somewhat repulsed by the movie, by the '98 movie at the time. Now with some hindsight, there are some things to love about the '98. Um, but it's definitely a product of its time for sure. I liked the '98 not because it's not a great Godzilla movie. Like it kind of misses the whole point of Godzilla. But as a monster movie, where you have a giant lizard monster rampaging through the city, it's actually a fun movie. It just doesn't feel like Godzilla. It feels like a standard American blockbuster, kind of romp fest, and that's Roland Emmerich. That's his stamp all over it.
Mm-hmm.
But it holds a place in my heart just because it's a product of its time. But I do love the '98 design just because I do think it's cool, and the look of him is really unique. That shape of the head is so it's a brick. Beautiful.
Yeah. And then his final question is, have you ever thought about doing freelance work such as art commissions? Have you thought about doing stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't do commissions only because I'm so slammed with work. So I and the other thing is, I would probably charge way too much for a commission. So in the interest of fairness, I don't commissions. Normally I take on a couple client projects at a time. Like right now, I'm working 3 jobs.
Mm-hmm. So the next question is from Emiya. Jared, what kind of power source is Mechagodzilla using for his beam?
Well, like in the movie or before that?
Um,
'Cause in the movie, he's downloading the Hollow Earth energy source. Before that, I didn't really. They said there was some kind of special energy that was going to be inserted into the chest, and that was a part that was going to have that was going to be a bigger part of the movie, getting that energy into his chest, and then they wrote it out after I worked on it, so it was long gone. So I don't know if there was going to be some kind of additional energy source or something else that was going to, you know, insert into him. Before that, not knowing what kind of energy source it would take, I assumed it was like jet turbines and hydraulics that were going to be fueling. But they definitely went more sci-fi with everything later on.
yeah. So the next question, speaking of weapons, was there any weapon ideas you had for Mechagodzilla that didn't end up in the final film?
Like most of everything, I thought was made it in there, but there were a few things where like the spine flaps at the bottom of his tail. I had built in some rockets in those tail parts, and they were going to open up in my mind at least. They were going to open up, and he could have rockets for jumping or for swimming. So he could boost himself in different ways. So I had some jets built into the tail, but I never demonstrated it through the concept art, and I realized I should have put that out there because that would have shown yet another thing he can do. But most of all the weapons, they all made it in. I'm sure that in animation, probably in production, that they discussed probably a lot of different things that did or didn't make the cut.
I see. So the next question is from Slasher again, and his question is, what's Mechagodzilla's scale, like height and length?
I don't know. Everybody's asking me for the official numbers on his height, and I don't know. I have no idea. When I worked on it, I had Mecha at the same height as Goji, and that's what I assumed it was going to be. And then later on, I saw in the footage that they scaled him up. I was like, oh man, they really jacked him up. So I have no idea what his official height is.
That's fair. That's kind of funny too.
Yeah, I mean, nobody really tells us anything.
That's kind of an so this is off the questions, but do you know why concept artists are left in the dark as much as they are?
I mean, from a producer's standpoint, I wouldn't give anybody more information than they needed, I guess, to avoid secrets being spilled. Even though we're under NDA, which means we can't discuss anything until the movie comes out. So I kind of get it. And every project is very different. Sometimes you get to read the script. Other times you get like a brief sentence, or I've gotten so much as like 2 words about what to do. So it varies from show to show, and then like most of the time in details, like, or when concept artists are working on stuff, they're still writing the script. So in like the case of Godzilla vs Kong, they must have done probably a dozen rewrites, in between when I worked on it and when production like really kicks off. So, scripts are being rewritten all the time. They're being rewritten on set. They're being rewritten in the editing room. Films change a lot all the way to the final product, and it's so even though you think you may know something as a concept artist, it all could change. It all could get cut. You have no idea. And also when I'm working on stuff, it's 2 to 3 years before a movie comes out. A lot of times the script is still being written. Sometimes it's just a rough outline of something, and they're trying to get art to pitch to the studio. So it's a crapshoot, and that's why when you do finally make something on screen, it's a very rare occurrence.
I gotcha. Interesting. So we're on to the last few questions here. So we've got Jerry, who actually has worked in the game industry. He's a really cool guy. Worked on some of the Dragon Ball games some years ago. Did you know about King Ghidorah's skull being involved with Mechagodzilla in GK? And if so, was there ever supposed to be a Ghidorah skull inside of him?
Interesting. No, I didn't know about Ghidorah at all. So the whole Ghidorah psychic skull thing, that was all news to me. So they must have rewritten that. They must have wrote all that after I worked on it, because I only worked on it when the energy source was going into his chest, and that was called the Orca Z, and that was all I knew about it, is that he gets this energy put into his chest, and that's what activates him. But I didn't, like, the whole Ghidorah angle was brand new to me. So I actually thought it was interesting. It kind of added some stakes to the whole thing.
Yeah. And just a quick follow-up question. Would you have changed anything about his design had you knew about the Ghidorah stuff?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So the next question is from Old Burbman, who's also a really cool guy. He said, have you ever noticed that Mechagodzilla is a mix of all three, or is that just a coincidence?
Of all three Mechagodzillas?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I mean that's intentional. He's got a little bit of everybody in there. So there's a little bit of, Mecha King Ghidorah. I looked at his design. I looked at Kiryu and Showa, and so there's a little bit of everybody sprinkled throughout GBK. I'm a huge fan of the homage.
That's awesome. So we've got a question from Honey Bunny, and her question was, what films or franchises do you wish you could work on?
Oh man, that's a huge list. Well, I've always wanted to work on a Transformers movie. Obviously, anything in the Marvel lineup or the DC lineup. About a billion heroes I'd love to work on. I do want to work on more kaiju movies in general, just because that's where my heart is. My moniker is Monster Mash, so I love big monster movies, fighting and stuff like that. Yeah, I'd love to do more big kaiju movies. I really hope TVK opened up the door for more of them.
That'd be awesome if they did.
I hope so, and clearly fans sent a message that this is we want more of this, and hopefully Legendary will listen to it. I'm sure they will.
Yeah. Hashtag continue the Monsterverse, right?
Well, absolutely, and the fact that they're talking to Adam again, it's a great sign.
Yeah. So we got one last question from Hamid, and his question is, what is your biggest inspiration for Elliot and Pete's Dragon? What did you go off besides the original movie?
Oh, interesting. Well, I wanted to, for Elliot, I really wanted to homage the original design, the cartoon. But then they hit you with a curveball, which is like it's not going to be a scaly dragon; he's going to be furry, and that was a curveball because you're like, oh man, a furry dragon, that's new. So it was kind of looking at the old design and then homaging that and trying to update it as much as possible. And and to make the anatomy more realistic and things like that. So I didn't really blend in a lot of other animals, but I did do some versions where I was actually trying to sing the song. There's the Peach Dragon song where he's like, the head of a camel and the tails of a dragon. I don't know what it is. Yeah, I pretty much just tried to homage the original design and just kind of update it.
Awesome. So we got one last text question, and it's from Smile Goji. He's got a paragraph here. Smile Goji, I think, needs no introduction. So first he said, do you mind if he sends you a friend request on Discord?
I'm never on Discord, but but you're welcome to.
The next question is, or the next thing he wanted to let you know is he autographed your frame. And then he also wanted you to know that your Pennywise design should have been used in the final film.
I mean, it's in there. It's definitely stuff I did is definitely in there.
And then he said, "Thank you for being my favorite person in the MonsterVerse designer bunch."
That's so. Thank you.
And then he said, "Edge of Tomorrow is the coolest action movie he has seen."
I agree. They were going to make a sequel, and then I think Emily Blunt said it was too expensive.
Interesting. So, Jared, if it's okay with you, I'm going to let some people join the call. I'm going to talk for you for just a few minutes. So if you guys want to raise your hands, we will get moving here. So we're going to bring William on first. So William, you have been sent the okay. There we go.
Hello.
All right. I originally had one question for you, but I eventually came up with 3. If that's fine with you.
Sure.
All right. My first question: do you have a favorite Godzilla movie or movies aside from the Mechagodzilla films?
Yeah, Shin Godzilla. I'm sure that's a popular answer, but Shin Godzilla is so perfect.
All right. I don't know if you can answer this one or not, but when the movie was in development, did Adam Wingard ever request something specifically for Mechagodzilla's design?
Yeah, I mean we got notes, which are their requests, and their notes were they wanted Mechagodzilla's body to have a different silhouette than Godzilla. So that was one requirement that I had to do on all the images was throw their silhouettes up next to each other so they looked different. So their silhouettes had to look different. That was one request, and then the other request was there were like a few other things. One was they didn't want teeth in the mouth; they wanted the teeth bolted to the face. That was their note, and then they wanted to change the hands up. Those were their notes that I got in between version 1, which is the more Godzilla looking version I did, and then version 2 was what got selected.
That actually leads into my last question. Toho is usually famous for having very strict guidelines when it comes to redesigns of their monsters. How exactly did you get like the symmetrical / chameleon like hands past Toho?
I have no idea. It's remarkable because I never heard from anything from Toho. All my notes were from production designer Oliver Scholl and then Adam, and that was it. So I never heard from anyone from Toho. Versus when I was on RPO, I heard from Toho. So they would request because Toho had the final say on RPO's Mechagodzilla. So I heard from them on RPO, and I never heard a thing on GVK. So I assume that at some point they had to go make their pitch to Toho, and I know this because I was asking my supervisor Lindsay McGowan. I was asking him, well, you guys worked on King of the Monsters and all these things. How did that go? And their response was it was a very tough show to work on because of Toho. Not because Toho is difficult to work with, but just because they were very strict about their designs. And so I assumed like, okay, here we go. We're gonna hear from Toho on this, and we didn't hear anything. So I think at one point the director of King of the Monsters, Michael Dougherty, he had to fly down to Japan to make his pitch to King of the Monsters to Toho directly. So I assume Adam had to do the same thing, but I never heard anything. I never heard notes from Toho. As far as I know, the Mechagodzilla that I did, they just said, we're going to trust Adam on this. I don't know, because he, or on the flip side, they may have fallen in love with it and just given their go ahead. So it was shocking to me, like the fact that the second version that I did got the go. I mean, that's so rare. I've worked on designs where I've had to do up to 50 versions of a character or creature, and so when they pick version 2, it's wild. It's so rare.
All right, so I'm gonna move William back down.
All right,
let's see.
Again, thank you so much.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, let's go ahead. We're going to do Timothy next. So Timothy is a artist himself who's really cool. So if he wants to accept that, he should hop in.
Hi.
Hello.
I really have one question, and it's about how you approached Mechagodzilla's design in terms of the mechanical aspect of it, because at the moment I'm working on my own line of Godzilla redesigns just for the heck of it, and Mechagodzilla and the robots is what I've always seemed to have trouble with.
Yeah, it's making the mechanics make sense. That's the hard part. So the way that I kind of approached it and I think about it, even if it's a robot, is I'm still thinking in terms of anatomy. So in Mechaji's case, I based it off of Godzilla's anatomy. Similar proportions, things like that. But really, what you want to do is just place the joints. It's all about the pivot points and the joints for how things are going to move. So if you think about your own anatomy, your elbow, for example, your elbow only pivots, in one position. If you rotate your forearms, your arms rotate. That pivot point is happening closer to your elbow. So what I do is I put joints or mechanics that mimic those movements in the arms or legs. That kind of gives it the illusion that it makes sense. But there's no way any of it really makes sense, because to actually build a giant structural Mechagodzilla would be insane.
Well, this was really helpful information, and I'm happy I got to talk to you about this. Thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure. Nice meeting you.
We'll go ahead and move Timothy back down, and then we're going to bring Don in. Don's a really cool guy. He's been looking forward to this, and he's been waiting for a while. So, Don, if you want to accept that.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, there we go. So, first off, I want to say, well, I'm actually the same guy who, like, a few days ago was like, the script and I don't remember. But I'm actually more of an artist. And speaking of, you like gave a shout out to me the other day, which is really cool too. So thanks for that.
Oh, cool.
And something I'm very interested in with regards to working as an artist in the film industry is like the fact that I always assumed that there would be an issue of too much creative constriction. But now, and that my question was originally going to be based around that. But like now that I've heard you talk, I see that it's kind of the opposite. It feels like producers kind of leave you in the dark almost.
Yeah,
And
it's a mix.
and I was just looking at like your progress with Mechagodzilla 2021, and I just saw it's very cool to see how it went from like this kind of intimidating killing machine with sharp edges to like a purely industrial sort of Terminator style machine. Was that something that the director or producer team sort of pointed you in that direction, or was that something you had to sort of come up on your own? Like, is that generally how it takes place in the industry, that they just sort of tell you what they don't want, but not necessarily what they want?
Right. Yeah. Great question. Yeah. So in a meeting, they'll give you some guidelines about kind of where they're thinking about stuff. But you'll also hear this phrase like we'll know it when we see it. So they don't know what they want yet, and your job as a designer is to basically give them a lot of different options. Give them as many options, give them stuff to look at so that they can make a decision. And they are looking at stuff from you and about a half a dozen other artists. So you are given a sandbox to play in. Sometimes you have total free reign. Other times they are very strict, or there are boundaries from what they need. So example would be like a makeup, right? So this has to go on to an actor. The actor has to be able to perform in this makeup, right? So that's already a limitation because if it's got to go on an actor, that means somebody's got to wear this, somebody's got to put this on their head and carry the weight, things like that. That's already one limitation. But a lot of times they're not saying like, hey, we want boxy shapes, or we want shapes that look like the Terminator. The Terminator note that happened in the room when we were meeting. John Rosengrant, who's one of the co-heads of Legacy, along with Lindsay McGowan and two other gentlemen. So John was in that meeting, and John worked on all the Terminator movies. So he worked like he built the Terminator, like he's part of the team that built the Terminator.
Cool.
Yeah. Like the Legacy Effects team like goes way back, and so John goes in his head. He goes to like iconic design because that's just where he spent so much time. So he says, this thing's got to be a Terminator, and it's a very simple thing that he said, but that gave me the motivation. That gave me the inspiration to go.
Yeah, it's definitely very iconic, like how this Mechagodzilla specifically sort of lacks the most biomimicry. It's like the most industrial, almost.
Yeah.
Sort of no BS. Yeah.
And that was stuff that I was thinking about while I'm designing. The boxy shapes on the side of his legs and arms and all that stuff. That was stuff I'm thinking. On the second version, I'm like, okay, this first version I did looked just like a metal Godzilla, and they didn't like it for various reasons. What can I do that's the exact opposite of what they didn't like? And so that's when I said, okay, I've done a bunch of triangles. I've done a bunch of like really strong shapes. Maybe if I go boxy with it. So that's what my thinking was. Is I'm going to make it boxy. And I'm going to make it squared off. So there's a lot of really chunky shapes on this thing, and it was the total opposite direction to go, and it ended up being the right decision.
Well, that's cool to know. That was a great answer. Thank you. Yeah, hopefully one day I could like get into this industry or something.
Yeah, man. Look, if I can make it, anybody can make it. The trick is just you have to grind really hard to get good. That's that's the challenging part. Like I cut off my social life for a number of years just to work on my portfolio. Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, I paid a price, but
And now you're here.
but now all I do is work all day. So like I'm paying that price in another way. But you just have to be willing to keep pushing yourself as hard as you can.
Wow. Well, just want to say thanks again, and obviously again, and a million thanks for responding to my request that other time and giving me a story shadow that really like made the world of difference. That was awesome.
I love it, man. Great job. Keep it up.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna move Dawn back down, and then we'll bring in 2 more people, and then we'll wrap this up. I know we're a little over, so we're gonna try and make this a little quick. So Hamid, I sent you the acceptance.
Hey. Okay, so my first question is did any of your previous designs help create your version of Horus wearing his golden armor in Gods of Egypt? If so, which ones were they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they picked it. So yeah, it was one of the final versions I did made it. Both of those characters made it on screen. Horus and Set.
Interesting. Well, my second question is, what was Adam Wingard's first reaction to seeing your finalized iteration and early concept designs of Mechagodzilla for the first time?
Yeah, so that was exciting. We great question. We sat down in the meeting, and the first meeting, we had like two meetings. The first is a meet and greet where they tell you what they want and they pitch you the idea. The second time we sat down, we showed them our first pass between myself and 2 other artists, Darnell and Simon, and so we ran through the images, and then it's like Adam, the producer and the writer, and we're sitting in the meeting room, and there's about a dozen people so far, and so the first pass really didn't get any kind of reaction. It was like, oh, okay, so, and then we start looking at the design and tearing it down and breaking it apart, and so they said it looks too much like Transformers, and so that meant that they didn't like any of the thin plates or things like that. So they were coming up with stuff in the room and talking about things, and so the reaction was lukewarm. It was room temperature, but they liked what I did, and what they jumped onto was a couple of shots that I did where Mechagodzilla's his interior was open, so you can see the inside of his chest, and they liked that. And the reason why they liked that is because of the whole Orca-Z part that was integral to the story. So they said, why don't you keep going, Jared, and keep working on those designs. So that's when I got the go ahead that I'm going to do version 2, and that was it. So I knew, I was like, okay, I can keep going. So that was a good sign. It's always a bad sign when they're like, yeah, we're not liking anything here. Never a good sign. And so I got to go ahead to work on version 2, and I did all the work. I put out a ton of images, like more than I normally do for this one. I put out like 40 images one week. I counted. It was like 40 images one week, and I think I was up to doing like 30 images. And these are just like close-ups, detail shots, stuff like that. Stuff that I normally don't show off. But I knew, like, for this show, I had to do it. Anyway, so the second time we sit down, I've done version 2. I'm waiting for notes. They come in, they sit down, and we pop open the images. And the first one was the one that they liked, which was the cloud, Mechagodzilla in the cloud with the kind of background behind him. It was the keyframe that I did, and they looked at that, and I kind of looked at them, and they looked around the room, and they kind of looked at each other, and they were like side eyeing each other, like you could see them like out the corner of their eyes, like trying to catch each other's attention, and they kind of did their like not bad take, which is, if you guys have ever seen the Obama meme, not bad. That's what their face was like. They were like, oh, and that's when I was like, I got him. I was like, I knew I had him. Was that image? So that image came up, and they I could tell they locked onto it, and they were kind of looking at each other like, here we go, and that was it, and that was electric. That feeling is amazing when they're satisfied, and producers are going to hide it. They're trying to put on a poker face because they don't want you to know anything. But I could read their little expressions. They were excited.
Interesting. Well, I for one really loved it actually, and I'm sure I'm not alone on that. Thank you so much. Keep up the great work, man.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Catch you around. Bye.
There we go. So we're going to do one more, and then, Jared, if you want to promote yourself, put everything, we'll do that. So we'll bring Honey into this, and then we'll wrap things up.
Hello? Can you hear me fine?
Yep.
Yes.
You're good.
Okay, good. I was worried you couldn't really hear me. So mine's not really a question. Mine's more of a compliment on your work. Because I already got my one question answered. And, well, yeah, I really like your work, and I really like your design on Mechagodzilla. I think it was really nice. I really liked it.
Also here is Devilman. We live together.
Yeah.
I just wanted to compliment you too. I don't really have a question either. But just, yeah, I'm a big fan of all your work that you have on Instagram, Twitter. It's just a real blast when you post something, and I see some of my favorite characters in your designs, and it's real cool.
Oh, thank you so much.
So just, thank you for coming on the Kaiju Conversation. Talk to all of us.
Oh, my pleasure. No, you guys had some great questions.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, I just want to say I really like your work, and
keep it up.
Keep it up, I guess.
Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Bye.
All right, so that is all the questions we've got. Jared, thank you so much for doing this. I know we went a little over time. I apologize. This was awesome. A lot of awesome information, and personally, I my respect, love of your designs increased exponentially doing this. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And so now, I think it's only fair if you want to take a second to get links or something, go right ahead. But let us all know how we can support you, whether it's following you on Instagram or Twitter, or if there's some other way we can help support you.
That's you guys are so awesome. I mean, I'm sure everybody here follows me on Insta or whatever. Continue to follow me there, I guess. And just thank you guys for all your support. It really means a lot to me. It's working is somewhat isolating, because it's kind of you alone in a room, kind of working. So hearing that it has this kind of effect on people, it means a lot to me. It truly it gives a lot of meaning to the work. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you again so much. It's a true honor. I hope that we have been able to make you feel comfortable, and enjoy the last hour and roughly an hour and a half. It's more like an hour and 15 minutes. But I hope we were able to entertain you and not bore you with our questions.
Not at all. Not at all. No, this was a blast.
Alrighty. Well, in that case, I guess we're going to wrap up here. So thanks to Smile Goji so much for doing this. It's really appreciated. Not only me, thanks to everybody who asked a question, joined us for this awesome recording.
And, thank you for hosting. Thank you for doing a great job hosting.
Thank you. And I think with that, we're good to go. My Discord's broken, but oh well.
Well, thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it, and it was a lot of fun hanging out with you guys.
Well, I guess we'll let you go and have a good night. It was a great having a cameo by the dogs. You gotta have a cameo by the dog.
It wouldn't be a combo without the dogs in there.
Exactly.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good night.